It's the 29th of November, 2021. Welcome, everybody. I'm Dana Durnford, the nuclear proctologist.org. And we are forensic investigative journalists, basically, where we look into the nuclear industries, hence the proctologist part. I hope everybody's doing good. You can call in at 709-589-4406. 4406. As they like to say down here on the East Coast, 3406. Almost everybody here talks like that. How's it going today, boys? And I find it awkward because I've been kind of away for so long. And I hope everybody's doing good tonight. Let's jump right into it. All the telephone lines are open. Snare. Danger, keep out. That's Maralinga in Australia, where the British done nuclear testing. And here was 1,000 pounds of sneakers as a protest against nuclear weapons, because you can't have a real protest. So they got 1,000 nuclear shoes, not sneakers, I guess, but shoes. Here we go. Just to recap, TEPCO to abandon the REVA, which is the water filtration system. For the last 3 years, the system has been unused and kept out of operations. This was August the 12th, 2014. France says Japan has lost control. The French should leave the country. It's just to say that everybody should leave the country. TEPCO is unable to bring the contaminated water issues under control. It's April 21st, 2014. The Advanced Liquid Processing System, ALPS, has yet to function reliably. The utility which operates the plant promises to treat all contaminated water by March 2015, which is 4 years after nuclear meltdown started. And that was a goal that now admitting it will not be realized. And there's also, in 2014, there was places there where they don't even have control. And what they mean by that was it was lethal doses. You walk in there, you don't come back out. The Swiss embassy evacuates Tokyo fearing radiation. You don't really think they got the incinerators on the site just to burn dirty bombs and release them into the environment, do you? Swiss embassy evacuates Tokyo. France is like, see ya. Swiss is like, whoa, we're gone. None of their water filtration systems are working. TEPCO also said they were going to build a fence to stop the radiation going into the ocean. Only problem was they were expected to cost $1 billion and they would have had to foot the bill. So they didn't do that. Officials unsure what to do next. Korea calls Japan's handling of Fukushima incompetent. Now this weekend we done a special video because of the ice walls. TEPCO admits the ice wall, by the way, will not stop groundwater from entering the crippled Fukushima Daiichi building. For some reason, everybody forgets that headline, that story, and that fact. How convenient. EU Energy Commissioner calls Fukushima an apocalypse. Almost everything is out of control. TEPCO says the groundwater bypass operations are not having an effect. That's 2014. That the groundwater bypass operations are failing to reduce tons of water from entering the crippled reactor buildings and destroyed reactor buildings at the nuclear meltdowns. And the nationalized company known as TEPCO says they don't know when, if ever, the pumping operations will have any tangible effects on the ground. They were pumping water up. The ice wall operation will not meet expectations, 2014. And TEPCO officially announced today that they have found that the ice wall plans are not progressing according to fantasies. Now, they couldn't make it freeze. They knew this. Just nothing on. Rather than build a real wall, which TEPCO also would have had pay for, they elected for the ice wall because it was experimental, so taxpayers will pay for that. Nuclear report warns of an apocalyptic scenario at Fukushima. Could one day be considered the start of the ultimate catastrophe of the world and the planet, which are, by the way, the same thing, you know. It's so bad, like, they're trying to convince you there's no radiation at the site. That's what that was all about. But yet the whole country of releases from an airplane flying 1,000 feet above was 3 million becquerels just of the iodine-131. There's 10 times more iodine-132 for every iodine-131 that's created. There is 30 times more iodine-132 for every 131 that's created. There's 31 times more iodine-129 for every iodine-131 created. So that's just how that mathematic works when it comes to an isotope. You were able to extrapolate all these other numbers accurately from it. And by the way, the 132, 133 iodines, the fission iodines, are 9 times more effective ionizing and radiating the thyroid glands of insects and birds and mammals and animals and humans than the brutally effective iodine-131 is. But what you would extrapolate from that also is that at 3 million becquerels per square meter on the ground, like the size of your kitchen table, these are incredible numbers. And so that's just a gamma spectrum. They're not talking about the beta, the brutal, deadly neutrons, and the alphas, the X-rays, etc., 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 right? And the map actually looks like this. It covers the entire planet, and we have the actual numbers from around the planet that, from studies that verify this. By the way, they also found plutonium in every sample, and plutonium is named after the devil. It's everywhere. There's not 1,000 tanks, by the way. There's actually only 750 tanks. Yeah, you guessed it. We counted them. Deteriorating plant threatens mass extinction around the world. It does this because this is one of the models of the actual models of the xenon-133 fallout. It's saturated then with uranium, plutonium. The biggest byproduct is the curium isotopes. This video is 40 to 100 times the normal speed. And it'll take you up to, you can see the steam in the background. That's lethal China syndrome emissions. In the right conditions, it'll show up looking like steam. This is always happening at this site. So imagine these buildings, they're 190 feet high, disappearing in an invisible, normally fog of lethal radiation. This is lethal we're talking about. That's actually lethal. Ooh, so warning sirens at Brunswick Nuclear Plant undergo 2 weeks of testing. 2 weeks of screaming machines. So if you can hear the nuclear screaming machine, it was put there by activists through legislation to warn people so they can run away if your power plant breaks down. Because the crazies aren't going to actually tell you. So just putting the sirens there don't mean they were going to use them. But they will use them, of course, to make more money. So they test them every year on top of that. And they have to replace parts all the time. So it's a little industry. They turned it into an industry. they actually have an accident, they're not going to use the sirens. Because the problem with the radiation fallout is you can't see it or smell it or taste it or hear it or touch it or feel it or pick it up or throw rocks at it. Just breathing it in is enough to shorten your life considerably. And so you don't know which way to run, right? Because like if you notice with a snowstorm or rain, it doesn't just cover one little area. It's not like a beam of light, you know? So the sirens, everything within 10 miles, if you check within 50 miles of this place, you see a massive increase in Alzheimer's and dementia and autism, heart problems, liver, lung, respiratory, pituitary, thyroid, adrenaline, Down syndrome, diabetes. There's 1,800 illnesses and diseases. But they won't use the siren. During the test, the sirens will sound for 5 to 30 seconds. And so normally it's time to grab the pet. Always grab your pet when you're running away from like fires or tornadoes, or take your pet with you. You didn't buy it to leave it behind, did you? During the test, sirens will sound for children and insects and birds all over this area. The radiation is not limited to 10 miles. So the siren should be at least out to 50 miles. And they should stay there for 1,000 years. The Australian Radioactive Waste Agency, created to establish... Oh, I jumped or something? This shouldn't be up there. That's the next story. NNL DNV partners explore large-scale nuclear production of hydrogen for UK. Large-scale nuclear production of hydrogen. Hydrogen is one of the most energy-intensive things you can create. And using nuclear and then calling it carbon-free and stuff, I'm really sick of that now. That's 6 years straight listening to this carbon-free narrative. Since the 2015 Paris Accord, we've been bombarded with these cliches, yeah? It's revolting. It's like you can't even own the television anymore because they're just going to murder you with propaganda. Revealed to 27 London finance companies funding nuclear terrorism, aka arms race. 27 London, but that's actually a tiny fraction of them. You have to read the story to really appreciate the story. 26 financial firms in London accused of funding nuclear terrorism, including investment funds with links to the biggest terrorist group in the United Kingdom, the UK government. A campaign group report, Perilous Profiteering, has named hundreds of companies, involved in the nuclear weapons sector and their financial backers. This is some weird stuff, by the way. Analysts by the Ferret found that 26 were based in London. 6 have links to the Conservative Party, which plans to increase Britain's nuclear weapons arsenal. Insider trading, right? What you're seeing there. It is unsurprising that the same financial institutes who continue to pour funding into companies that make these weapons have close links with senior Conservative Party members. Now that's how business is done there. That's what they call business. Is yet another example of the cozy relation between the arm industries and the United Kingdom terrorism organization known as the government. The Children's Investment Fund Management, the demon investment companies using children's funds to invest in nuclear. And we're seeing this a lot in the last 10 years. It's really come to a whole different level of how investment companies are being used by the nuclear industry, right, to prop up certain facets of the nuclear industry, like the stock market and uranium, to artificially inflate the value of uranium to trick it seems like a coordinated effort where you have all these investment firms looking for their next way of setting up a Ponzi scheme. And so nuclear has been used over and over and over, artificially inflate the uranium. A prime example of that was the Globe and Mail. 3 times a week they push uranium stocks that have flatlined 10 years ago. It's 100% criminal. While nuclear weapons are controlled by the terrorism organization known as the government, their production is often contracted to private terrorism companies. And the report also revealed 338 institutions have financing and investment relationships with the 25 nuclear weapons producing companies, which is actually down from 390 the previous year. It's a huge industry, is what it is. It's an industry. Napandee chosen, which is talking about a nuclear waste storage site in Australia. Not for what British done to them, which they should be looking for, but for medical. So they stick it in you, kill you, then the stuff left over needs to go into a nuclear waste site. That's how it works, right? They stick the radiation in you, you die. Shortly after, all your hair falls out, your family spends all the money they got trying to save you, and they keep sticking more chemo into you until you finally die. Yeah, that's how it works. And then their urine, by the way, has to go into a nuclear waste site too. All their sewage is separated. It's a separate system. Even their walls and their rooms are lined with lead so you don't radiate the nurses out in the hallways. It's a death cult is the only way to describe nuclear. Napandee, a 211 hectare property near the town of Kimba, which is a very small town. They didn't let the natives, who actually owns title to the land, vote. Do you get any more racist and bigoted and prejudiced and biased than that, I wonder? Has been acquired, but remember, Australia is basically the same as United Kingdom. They're just in a place called Australia. In fact, in many ways, they're much more brutal than United Kingdom. They're overlords. Will be used to store the low and medium level nuclear waste, which is actually medical waste they're talking about. Notice how they frame the narrative? They don't want to come out and say it right away. Yeah, medical waste. It's what? Medical waste. I can't hear you. It's medical waste. What kind of nuclear waste you putting there? Stop putting your hand up in your face. Medical waste. But if it's so dangerous, you got to put it in a deep geological repository. How the hell does it cure somebody? Don't. It certainly got all of the right geological requirements, says the nuclear lapdog. We have a majority support from the local community, which is all farming country, right? That's all farming country down there. Look in the background. It's surrounded by farms. Yeah, good old nuclear. You can always count on them to be super evil, no matter what the subject. The WIP, a waste isolation pilot plant. Now, you know what a pilot project is? It ain't WIP, is it? Because WIP is supposed to be a pilot project to see how putting steel canisters down in salt is going to work out. They're not parking their luxury vehicles down there, by the way. Because, you know, it'll rust the shit out of it, right? The waste isolation pilot project, aka nuclear, it had a nuclear meltdown in 2014. We covered it. And the local media down there, KRQE, come out and tried to attack me. Took my clip, put it up on TV. Gets 13,000 nuclear waste shipment. They're planning to ramp it up to 17 in a week. Now, they spent $2 billion during a truck fire and another $4 billion to dig more holes in the ground because the truck had contaminated the underground facility. They abandoned the site because of a truck fire for 10 days, where there's 55 football field-sized caverns. 55. The whole story is crazy, no matter how you look at it. So the big plume come out there, and they lied about it and successfully hid it away. Attacked me trying to do it. So a lot of this has come from Los Alamos, near Carlsbad, the scum of the America, the scum hole of America, Carlsbad. Plant repository. It's not a repository, it's a pilot project. Idaho National Laboratories and Facilities Advanced Mixed Waste Treatment Project. Idaho National Laboratory Facilities Advanced Mixed Waste Treatment. Wrap your mind around that. Because it's only supposed to be transgenic waste that goes there, like contaminated gloves or contaminated tools. Of course, they like to say nuclear can't be transferred onto anything on any living cells. This is absurd. WIP is not full of living cells, hopefully. You don't know with these people, right? It could be full of dead animals that died from nuclear testing. They're nuclear waste too, right? There's billions of them. Half of WIP shipments in its lifetime came from the Idaho National Laboratory. Around 6,600 containers, huge containers, by the way, from legacy waste, which is left over. Legacy waste is from all the nuclear testing era, where they were like lunatics. Nuclear testing was a nuclear war, right? It's the same bombs, the same radioactive fallout. Instead of blowing people up, you just used a slow kill, radioactive fallout. But unfortunately, that's applicable to all the species. Transuranic waste is made up of clothing materials, equipment, and other waste like sludge, irradiated during nuclear operation. Irradiated? Well, first off, how does sludge get in the way again? Of the 13,000 shipments of waste sent to this crap hole known as WIP in the last 2 decades, 775 were considered RH waste, handled in shield cask and placed in the walls of the WIP underground salt deposit that gradually buries the waste. So it was in shield cast. And what that is, that's about a 50,000 ton container. It's totally just contaminated gloves and hammers, Dana. Yeah, I know, I hear you, man. They don't use that for that stuff, that kind of cast. They usually use that just for fuel rods. Truck drivers logged about 15 million miles. So everybody was on the highway with them were getting irradiated. Not only that, everything that goes down in the WIP is vented. The industry is just lunatic, yeah? They remind you of the Nazis. It reminds me of that Albert Haushofer story. Albert Haushofer was a Geolog, a geologist from the University of Berlin back when the war was raging over in Europe. And he got that job by keeping his mouth shut. But Nazis were wrapping up all the Jews and taking away, and some of his friends were getting taken away. And Haushofer began having pains of conscience and started writing a little paper that got a lot of attention. So it wasn't long before the Nazis showed up and wrapped him up and dragged him away to a Berlin jail. And the Nazis wouldn't execute you without you signing a confession. And usually execution was a bullet to the head or hanging, right? Haushofer wouldn't sign the confession. And so it was getting close to the end of the war. They shot him anyway. And when they picked up his body, this little settle, this piece of paper, fell out of his pocket. it was his confession. And it's very short. It was Schultz, just German for guilty, right? Schultz. Yeah, I'm guilty, but it's not what you think. And I should have Schafa, Unheil. I should have more sharply called evil, evil. I had put off my judgment for too long, and now I know what I'm guilty of. And I think we're all guilty of that. I decided not to sit in silence anymore. A very long time ago. There we go. This little clip is WIP. After the nuclear meltdown they had underground, they were having community meetings, and the nuclear apologists were mostly in the audience, right? But it was videotaped and streamed live. And so the nuclear industry likes to set up these narratives. They don't want debates. They want two controlled oppositions, complete control too, of the two people that's going to have a debate. They're both controlled opposition. And it works like this.
Are you still getting such waste that's not vented? And that could be a problem.
Okay, so that's a great question. So let me answer it more generally. There are no containers at WIP that are unvented. There is a requirement.
Let's play that again.
So that's a great question. So let me answer it more generally. There are no containers at WIP that are unvented. There is a requirement that all containers that come to WIP have to be vented. And that's not just a requirement for us to receive. It's also a requirement for the licenses that control the TRUPACs that all this waste is shipped in. The containers have to be vented. We have to do headspace gas analysis.
So everything that's shipped is vented. It's shipped while it's vented. It's shipped while when it arrives there, it's vented, rather. And then they have to repackage it to go down into the salt mines, that don't rust stuff, apparently. Try convincing someone around here the salt don't rust stuff, and they'll just shake their head at you. So he just told you that, where did we go? Where's it to? Truck drivers. Yeah, so 15,000 miles, or 15 million miles of trucking. It was all vented into all the highways, all the communities. And now that it's in New Mexico, yeah, we're going to vent it. Yeah, because the gas is built up, displaces the oxygen. And if you induce the oxygen or somebody turns on a light, there's a little spark, boom, it'll detonate. This is the problem with it because it's extremely volatile. But that's quite the revelation, that everything is vented on the highway all the time. Not only that, when you're talking about those big casts, those 50-ton casts, 50,000, 100,000 pound containers, you're still getting brutal gamma shines, X-rays, and neutron bursts coming out of that. So everybody's in danger on the highway from these things constantly. With 15 million miles under their belt, everything is vented. That's terrorism. I want to congratulate everyone who involved in this milestone, from the employees at the generator site who certified packaged the waste, to the workers at WIP who mined the disposal rooms and prepared the waste for its permanent disposal in a pilot project that's been going for 2 decades. WIP's first shipment was delivered for disposal from Los Alamos in March 1999, and the site went on to dispose of waste from 13 facilities, from nuclear weapons facilities. I'm just a nuclear terrorist. That's what they all sing in the shower, right? When they get it each day. The final shipment from Rocky Flats. My God, man, what they done at Rocky Flats, Rocketdyne and the rest of them. That was evil. The FBI actually went into Rocky Flats and closed it down. They were gone rogue on the planet. Yeah, it's nuclear. What do you expect, Dana? I know. I'm just saying. It's nuclear. I know. I kind of get it. Department of Energy. There's like the death cult itself, the secret society death cult. That's one of the heads of the Medusa. Efforts to reduce the legacy defense transuranic waste footprint. They're going to take it out of here and put it another footprint over there. Problem with it is it's splitting the atom. And that's all the WIP is vented, right? Right up until the very end. That was the problem with the Nevada, the mountain out in Nevada. I can't remember the name of it now. That's how, because you get caught up in all these different countries and all these different nuclear stories. Shocking, I can't remember the one in Nevada, the mountain. What the hell, man? Yucca Mountain. They spent $20 billion on just litigation for that mountain. $20 billion. $20 billion on litigation. It was how they stole the money, right? And they recently recovered. We never got to the story because I'm 3,000 stories behind officially yesterday. I got another 80 between last night and today, nuclear stories, by the way. So there are 3,080 nuclear stories for 2021 that I'm behind on. Because when I'm out doing research expeditions, I can't cover the cycle, right? I still gather it up. There's amazing stories there. None of them are good, of course, but they're amazing. Problem is, every single nuclear story is full of lies. Their entire legacy, their entire history is predicated upon deception, misrepresentation, like purposeful deception. This is what they do. This is why I describe them as a secret society, death cult. It's because they control so much media that the media willingly, and like it's like a death cult is the only way to describe it. I'm not going to cover the rest of the WIP story. It'll just get me pissed. Plans to send diluted plutonium. We've covered this years ago, by the way, and in between many times. Plan to send diluted plutonium to waste isolation pilot plant slammed before lawmakers. But what are you going to do? If the Department of Energy wants to do it, they'll go ahead and do it. Ain't nobody stopping them. This is a death cult. They got no morals. Zero. There's zero morals in the equation. So what they're doing with the plutonium is they're mixing it with soil and sealing it, of course. And then they're shipping that so it can't be used as a weapon, right? That was the theory. Unlike the United Kingdom, who accidentally just let it, because it's really a gas once you take it out of storage. You can store it in tanks, like Cascade tanks, the big welder tanks. We used to use them years ago when I was young. We used the Cascades for hookah diving, for deep diving. Because the Cascade tanks, are like 6 feet high, 5 feet high to 6 feet high. And you can change the valves on them to 5,500 psi. So here's the incredible volume of air. And you don't want the compressor running all the time because carbon dioxide can get back into the system. And when you're deep diving, and I've done a lot of that, it's extremely volatile to humans, very toxic, I should say, to humans. When it's under pressure, under atmospheric pressures, it has this incredible toxicity to it. I've lost quite a few friends to it over the years. Department of Energy officials say the dilute and disposal method would allow the waste to be disposed of at the WIP Waste Isolation Pilot Project. Under present requirements not increase the risks at the facility, and that a judge had ruled that how they're going to measure the volume that goes in there. And so they found a way, like a back door of saying, well, we won't include the boxes, even though the box is becoming radioactive, not the box, but the containers, they actually become radioactive. But because no one will challenge them, right? Nobody in positions to challenge them, including myself. Like if I had a real organization, it wouldn't take me long to really dent this industry. It's left itself very vulnerable, but there's not many people out there with courage and fortitude that's willing to go after the actual demons themselves, right? We are demon hunters here for sure. This industry is nothing, it attracts the worst of the worst. And they always seem to have that strange, the one thing we see with these nuclear experts is they're cowards. Whenever a car backfires, all of them will defecate immediately. That's the nature of these people. They're incredible cowards. A lot of them don't even understand how evil they are. 34 metric tons of plutonium. Metric tons. 34 metric tons. And it's been said that a couple of pounds of it is enough to kill all the species on the planet if you can get them to sequester a few isotopes. Wrap your mind around that. 6 metric tons of waste by using the dilute and disposal method where they mix it with soil or something. An accident will occur. It's a matter of time, says the advocates against what they're doing. And when WIP was created, the state of New Mexico wisely put into place the forms of law, agreement, contracts, and an act. I want to emphasize that they are still in place today. But they're not, right? It's like Mark Zuckerberg can't go to jail. He can't, right? Because Facebook has human rights. Therefore, they're a person. Therefore, they're the entity, not Mark Zuckerberg. He just gets all the money, right? And the investors, but he gets most of the money. But if he commits a crime, they can't put Facebook in a jail cell. So what they do is they give the Facebook a fine. Which is what happens at WIP, by the way, too, right? And so they give them a fine, and it's always going to be a small fine because the regulatory was captured a long time ago, same as the universities and the medias. They were captured. And they always use these two pictures of children from high school going at the WIP pre-2014 nuclear meltdown. Another picture you might see out there is a strange one. They got a guy looking up at empty tanks. Now, if those tanks were full of radioactive water, you couldn't actually stand there. Because you're talking about 1.4 million sieverts, the tanks are not thick enough to shield you from these kinds of numbers we're talking about. The ice wall is intended to limit the sea breach. I don't know where the headline of that story went to. We jumped. I must have missed the headline accidentally. Such is life. Yeah, that was from the earlier. That accidentally ended up down there some way or another. Some way or another. Should TEPCO, not the homeless, but TEPCO build a real wall without the stupid ice? That was the show we done Saturday night. At 100% yes on the poll. Nations, by the way, we got a poll going tonight. Hi, everybody. We got a poll going on. Make this a bit. Where are we to here? Oh, I got to switch that. Bear with me. There you go. That looks pretty good. Should nuclear scientists someday work at the ongoing Fukushima Nuclear melted nuclear reactors? So we got a 26% of the, or 96% of the people think that nuclear scientists should someday work And 4% don't think that nuclear scientists should work at the nuclear meltdown. Okay. Whatever. Weirdo. Should such a disaster at a Taiwanese nuclear power plant, that was nation lacks resource for a nuclear disaster at Taiwan. I skipped somehow past it. Nations lack resources for a nuclear disaster. If they had a nuclear disaster in Taiwan, it could require the resettlement up to 10 million people. Well, first off, like Taiwan has Orchard Island. Now, Orchard Island is where the natives of Taiwan, not majority, but the big percentage of them lived there under reservation. And so Taiwan was looking for a nuclear dump. So they approached Orchard Island natives and asked them could they build a tuna canning factory for canning tuna. And the natives were like, that's pretty cool. Why not? Are we going to get anything? Oh, yeah, we're going to kick back to everybody in the community. They're like, this is fantastic. We love tuna. And so they built a nuclear dump there. Called it a tuna canning factory. That's crazy, right? That's nuclear, though. By the way, Taiwan had over 2,000 nuclear students spam the internet when Fukushima melted down for over 2 years straight. It was learned a couple of years ago. So you need to resettle 10 million people if you have a meltdown at the nuclear power plant. So more than 1,000 pairs of shoes are lined up at the entrance of Liberty Square in Taipei yesterday. The National Nuclear Abolition Action Platform laid out the shoes to signify a rejection of restarting construction at the Fort Nuclear Power Plant, which is going into the ballots their next referendum. And remember the last referendum in 2018, they had, should we import food from nuclear wasteland? Well, they didn't actually say that. Should we discontinue the ban on imports of food from Fukushima? It didn't say that either. It said, should we import food from Fukushima, Japan? No mention of the nuclear meltdown whatsoever. And 70% of the people, millions of them, 7 million or something, voted no, scumbags. And so now they're going to have on the referendum, should they open the Fort power plant, was never finished, which includes a question on whether to restart construction on the Fort Nuclear Power Plant. I can't remember what year that was. In their report, members found 8 issues related to the plant, including the storage of spent fuel rods. That's because they're still splitting the atom, radiating your country and the planet, because there's no containment, right, around the storage stuff. Like WIP, everything is vented, so is nuclear power plants. Suggested that the executive young and the government officials review their finding. No place in the world has solved the issue of dealing with the spent nuclear rods. Also, Taiwan is on a geological fault line. It's true, it is. Not to mention, we face the threat of a military confrontation with China. That's not going to be a confrontation unless the Americans get involved, which it looks like they are. A nuclear plant, which the American wanted to nuke China in the 50s. They fought hard for it too, just as they were finishing up with North Korea. And let's go get the Chinese where we're at. A nuclear plant would be a dangerous target. Well, it doesn't make sense for China to attack the nuclear power plant because they're not very far from China. Not only that, they can't use the country if they radiate the country, basically. Urging people to vote yes in the referendum on nuclear power plant. Josh said that Microsoft co-founder Shitty Gates and Tesla CEO all have also championed the benefits of nuclear energy. So these two billionaires that got to pay their allegiance to nuclear, or the nuclear industry will destroy them, is being used as if, well, if they said it's good, then it's good, so shut up attitude is, that's what we're seeing now heavy for the last couple of decades with the media. They got a couple of their so-called icons, and if they're pro this or pro that, then everybody else should be too. All right? Oh, that's in the wrong spot. Or is it? Was there a number there or something? I got no idea. Hang on. Yeah, I can't remember what that was for. If the government ends to use nuclear power, oh yeah, every household would have to pay 30,000 Taiwanese dollars more in electricity per year, which worked out to $1,075 a year extra if you get rid of nuclear by 2025 in Taiwan. But they should get rid of nuclear in Taiwan by 2025. I'll show you why. In front of a silent protest, the time with those sneakers I showed you, they also put up signs urging people to vote against nuclear. A demonstration that this demonstrates that there is quite a lot of opposition to the use of nuclear power. So Taiwan in 2021 had a 5.7 tremor. 5.7. You're like, Dana, that's not so bad. Fear-mongering. Mom, I can see nuclear scientists worldwide. Mom, Dana's fear-mongering again. Calm down. Taiwan uses an intensity scale of 1 to 7. So, a 5.7 on a 1 to 7 scale is an 8.14 on the Richter scale, yeah? And it shook the entire island for a long period of time. And when you got an 8.1 earthquake, that means you're going to have a lot of aftershocks. When you get up to that size, there's a lot of aftershocks, okay? So no good having nuclear anyway, but not in a nuclear wasteland. TEPCO determined to discharge the Fukushima water into the Pacific. If you go back and watch, I've done several presentations on tanks where I got all kinds of historical documents on this, getting into our 11th year straight. My God, you've been at this for that long. Tokyo Electric Power Company. Every time I hear that, I want to punch somebody in the mouth. Not that I'm a violent person, but I want to punch some nuclear scientist in the mouth every time I hear the word TEPCO. TEPCO, boom. Plans to begin a geological survey. Not that I can punch anybody in the mouth. For God's sakes, if you're a nuclear scientist out there, when you change your pants because you heard me say that, remember, I didn't mean it. Or did I? TEPCO plans to begin a geological survey and started to prepare for the construction of a 1 kilometer undersea tunnel. So they're going to dig a tunnel 1 mile offshore, and they're going to dump all the water down the tunnel. Look, the IAEA went to Fukushima to get water samples before they done it. You didn't believe that, did you? Sucker. What they done was they went way offshore, way offshore, and got water samples. What did you think? They went and got water samples from the tanks? You're stupid. You're gullible. The industry loves you a bit. No. IAEA, United Nations, nuclear scientists, nobody's went to Fukushima. Hence the reason we got to have a friggin' poll tonight. Should nuclear scientists someday work at the ongoing Fukushima nuclear meltdown? 27 votes, 96% said, hell yeah, bitches, send these dogs down to Fukushima and get it on. Get it on. About 1 point, well, it makes sense, right? They're going to run out of homeless at some point. About 1.3 million tons of contaminated water stored at the... Okay, so the 1.3 million tons is supposed to be 1,000 tanks. They had 1,000 tanks in 2013. They had 1,200 in 2014. They had 900 in 2017. Yes, they did. They had 1,000 in 2019 and 1,000 in 2021. 1,000 in 2013 and 1,000 in 2021. Do you really think they were filling up those tanks for an extra 8 years? There's no water in the tanks because if you fill up the tanks with this kind of water at 2.2 sieverts per liter, which is minimum, and that's just beta, by the way, they're not talking about gamma, alpha, neutrons, so it's infinitely more than that per liter, is 1.4 million sieverts. The problem with that is you can't get on the site again to build another tank, and you can't build these tanks there and then fill them up, because now you can't get on that part of the province, the prefecture anymore. All in large tanks. Oh yeah, large tanks. Oh yeah, sure. The cores of the 3 reactors is actually 4. Like when you're changing the cores, you don't take out the whole core. So reactor 4 core melted down, and the fuel pools, decades of reactor cores with no containment, by the way, caught fire and blew up and blew up and caught fire and caught fire and blew up and blew up and caught fire. Unlike wind and solar, nuclear power can be switched on and off at any time. Yeah, right. You can't just switch nuclear on and off. It doesn't work that way. And without the planet-warming emissions produced by gas and coal don't heat up the planet. You low-down, dirty rats. This is fallout of Neptunium-239, for instance. Covers the whole planet in a great big pulse of energy every second for millions of years, pulsing at 186 miles per second. Pulsing energy. How much energy does it take to make something go 136 miles per second? 1,000 miles per second, rather. Like even 186 miles per second is daunting, right? Imagine 186,000 miles per second. Because that's what these invisible plumes, and there's many of them, right? Okay, all right. If there's so many of them, Dana, show us some. Hang on, I will. Next time. 210. Well, bear with me. The big thing I find really strange too is around all the nuclear waste sites and dumps and nuclear power plants surrounded by farms. You think that's an accident? 2010. Hang on, I gotta run up. Fill up my reservoir. Here we go. I know it's only rock and roll, but it's hard keeping up with it, isn't it? So, like when you hear all these cliches, carbon neutral and net zero and carbon free and global warming and climate change, you ever wonder where all that comes from? Well, that's the father of global warming right there. United Nations haven't gave him a nickel. This is Miles. He's the father of net zero. Your carbon footprint, how are we going to get that down? Nobody knows. The idea of a personal carbon footprint was popularized by a large advertising campaign of the fossil fuel company BP in 2005. The campaign was intended to divert attention from the fossil fuel industry onto the individuals, consumers. And then you got the father of global warming, James Hansen. And the Hansens was testimony, a single testimony was pivotal, turning point in the history of global climate change. And started the official beginning of the global climate change, climate warming policy debate. So the father of global climate change, the father of global warming, the father of net zero, and BP oil, the father of carbon. And then that's been used now to bludgeon you and your friends and your families and blame everything on you. It worked so well for BP that United Nations decided to use it to bludgeon the planet with now. Much of the world has been turning away from nuclear power with its aging plants, legacy of meltdowns, radioactive waste, but governments, some governments, all governments, big companies, and billionaires are convinced that technology can help save the planet. Oh yeah, now I remember. First off, this is what nuclear has already done. It started an extinction level event on our planet, and we've done the research, the expeditions for years and years and years, from Vancouver, British Columbia to Alaska, year after year, and what we documented was no less than an extinction level event. An actual extinction level event. Can small nuclear reactors help the climate? Unlike wind and solar. Well, wind and solar, of course, can be, you can use compressed air storage, and there's a new example of that recently, with almost $1 billion investment for compressed air storage. And then there's pumped hydro, where you pump water up a hill into a reservoir to use as a big battery for when there's no wind or no sunshine. And both of these technologies are actually obsolete technologies. Utilities have gravitated towards carbon-intensive coal and gas plants to supplement less reliable solar and wind resources. So we see the same attack. The attack is always the same as it's not reliable, and the sun doesn't always shine, and the wind doesn't always blow, and there's no batteries. And it'll be years before they come up with battery technologies. But never mind. Hang on. You always got to do it the hard way, haven't we? You can't just have a normal conversation. No. Well, because first off, I guess you can't really educate the population applicably if you don't give them the documentation to back up your assertions. So pumped hydro can deliver 100% renewable electricity. Pumped hydro. I know this sounds crazy, but you're going to pump water, extra energy, pump the water up the hill, and you put it in a reservoir. And when there's no wind or no sunshine, the water runs down the hill. Okay, but you can have two. You can have pumped compressed air wind storage. So you dig big tunnel and it's low pressure, 120 psi. And so one company, we just covered it. We just covered it. Hopefully. There's this company, which is 400 megawatts. It's 1/3 of a reactor, a little over 1/3 of a reactor. It's almost half the energy of a reactor of compressed air storage for 8 hours every day that has a shelf life of around 50 years with no toxic material. So we can run the grid during peak power for 8 hours straight. It's the same as a large coal plant, etc., etc. So can small nuclear reactors really help the climate? That story was used to segue claiming, and look, they even mentioned James Hansen. Ew! One of the first scientists to publicly warn about, he only done it once. Now he's like reeling in the dollars. He got over $1 million from Taiwan for promoting nuclear when Chang was on a hunger strike down there. Remember that degenerate? Do small modular reactors already exist? And we hear that it doesn't, but what we hear is this story about the Ruskies, the commies, with their barge. Now, the barge was a derelict barge that was basically abandoned for 10 years. So then over the next 10 years, they built these reactors, these so-called small reactors. They're not small. You can't build this in a factory and put it on the back of a truck and ship it somewhere, okay? That's what a small modular reactor is. By the way, they don't exist. So what they used was this great big stupid thing that's only got a 10-year license because it's well, the Russians are notoriously corrupt, but it's made from reject parts. So they towed it down to this little community. Now they got a long history of what they do with their small reactors. Like nuclear is a small reactor. They leave it on the bottom of the ocean floor. Radioactive wrecks, there's 18,000 dump sites just in the Arctic from Russia and the Soviets. A barge carrying a damaged reactor. 5 reactor blocks from nuclear power units on ship were sunk off the eastern coast in Russia. A barge carrying a damaged reactor containing spent nuclear fuel was removed from a nuclear submarine also sunk up there. According to experts, the K-27 submarine that sunk up there had 2 nuclear reactors. They got 160 nuclear subs abandoned in northern Russia, by the way. But then you got the crazies, academics. So they done this study on a sunken wreck submarine, and he said it's found that neither the submarine hull, steel hull, nor the reactor vessel will be destroyed by corrosion for at least 1,000 years. Like, I got 14,000 hours on the ocean floor, and it doesn't work that way. And it's just shocking that academics would try to publish a study, but it's even more shocking is that they published it. And this is supposed to be an accredited journal. Of course, Elsevier, Springer, and Wiley, the 3 biggest journals on the planet, own 22,000 journals between them. They get, that's a fascinating thing too, isn't it? North America, we produce around 4.3 million academic studies every year, paid for by taxpayers. When the study's finished, they give it to these Elsevier, Springer, and Wiley for free. They put it behind a paywall, and you got to have a student, university, or industry card. Some of these are worth $50,000, by the way, just to peruse their science section. Or you can't even read the headlines. And they keep all the money. So the taxpayers pay for all the studies. Elsevier, Springer, and Wiley take them and lock them up behind a paywall. And now they're published. That's what published means. We took our study that cost millions of dollars and paid for by the taxpayers. We gave it to Elsevier or Springer or Wiley, and they accepted the journal and said, "Great job!" And now they put it behind a paywall where nobody can ever see it. If there's such thing as stupid, that's definitely got to be it. Then you got the nuclear graveyard in Plymouth where submarines go to die. No, that's where they're abandoned. Nuclear submarines, like the Americans got all kinds of it. Russia's got 160 abandoned. The United Kingdom got 19. None of them are decommissioned. The NRC staff has not analyzed scenarios with extended and widespread failure of off-site protection actions, which continued for more than several days. So, in case of an accident, they've never actually done, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission has never done or analyzed scenarios that show what would happen to the population if there was a large release. There's a large. And the list is, there's a lot of subs. There's a lot of subs were scuttled in the oceans. A lot of nuclear weapons lost in the oceans. That the nuclear submarine, a lot of the older nuclear submarines. So I know Swanee D was asking me actually a couple of times now, and I still never got to it. Do nuclear submarines release radiation into the environment? That's an emphatically yes. The older nuclear subs had no containment. When the reactor was started up, they had vents opened on the outside, and water would just circulate and go right out the other end and run over the cooling system. And everything was vented constantly. Every time they came to the surface, they would have to vent absurd amount of radiation into the environment. But you can't... I put that headline there to remind me that this was a derelict. It's not a small modular reactor. You can't build it in factories. You can't ship it on trucks. That's the criteria for small modular reactors, right? Planetary catastrophe averted by a Russian crew in a burning nuclear submarine. Planetary catastrophe. So a nuclear sub having a meltdown is considered by some experts as a planetary catastrophe. So Fukushima is a planetary catastrophe, unequivocally, right? It's a little complicated for people that are not familiar with the subject, but I don't think anybody like that would make it this far into the video to first go. Because this topic is more of a, you love it or hate it type subject. 14 sailors who died during a fire last week in a nuclear-powered Russian military submarine prevented a planetary catastrophe. It doesn't matter. Fukushima already beat you to it. With their lives, they saved the lives of their colleagues, saved the vessel, and prevented a planetary catastrophe. That's some pretty strong words, isn't it? Prevented a planetary catastrophe. The fires was Russia's most serious naval incident since 20 people died in 2008. It's routine, yeah? And you had the Curse with over 100 people sank there. Meet the Ohio-class American nuclear doomsday submarine. This is absurdness, by the way. Submarines running around in the ocean full of nuclear weapons. All you gotta do is run into something and it's game over. Like an unrecorded wreck. Spill their coffee and jerk the wheel and run into a big rock. And you got all these nuclear weapons could melt down. It's a complicated story. 9 years after atomic bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, Ashiro Honda Godzilla depicted a monster awakened from the depths of the ocean to wreak havoc on Japanese cities. And Japan now uses as a caricature of Fukushima. A giant fire-breathing reptile, however, was less horrifying than what was to come. In less than a decade's time, would be dozens of real undersea beasts capable of destroying multiple cities at a time. Of course, he's referring to the boomer ballistic submarines. All they do is they go out and sneak around on the ocean, waiting for someone to attack their country, and then they're going to launch their weapons to whatever destination they're given. Just like cockroaches out there living in a submarine all the time. The UK nation's nuclear laboratories, anytime you see national nuclear laboratories for any country, it's always goblins, isn't it? I mean, like real goblins. People say, Dana, goblins are not real. But no, they're actually real. Trust me. If you hang around nuclear for a while, you're like, yeah, that's crazy. Springfield Nuclear. Every time I see that with United Kingdom, of course, Mr. Burns, right, on the Homer Simpson, that was about indoctrination, same as Spider-Man and Superman was. Net zero compliant, net zero, and I showed you the father of net zero just a little while ago, right? The United Nations just scooped climate change, global warming, net zero, and carbon footprint off those four entities, and that's their new mandate, right? By the way, United Nations is 195 militaries dressed up as a wolf in sheep's clothing. After acquiring nuclear weapons, Pakistan became more aggressive in using terrorist groups. Yeah, so did China, so did Russia. And everybody else, right? As soon as they get their nuclear in their country, then evil takes over their country. Iran nuclear talks are starting again, and a lot has changed. Here's what I think. Like, Iran's surrounded by 49 American military bases that are stocked with the biological, chemical, and nuclear weapons. They're carrying out electronic warfare for decades against the country. And they have land, sea, air embargoes. But they can't, they got 9 million soldiers in Iran. And Iran is not a chicken. Even though right now it's a chicken on a barbecue. But at some point, they're going to kick that chicken into the corner. They're going to come out and peck your friggin' eyeballs out. Right? And they got disgusting Grossi down there talking to the president of Iran. The 2015 deal gave Iran relief from economic sanctions in return for limits on its nuclear program. Right, so you know they're going to do a nuclear program. You bring in heavy and sustained embargoes, land, sea, and air embargoes against the country. Like, so the thing about Iran, like, how do we get to war in Iran? That's what the Washington Institute think tank had said. It's very difficult to see how this president is going to get us to war with Iran.
I frankly think that crisis initiation is really tough. And it's very hard for me to see how the United States president can get us to war with Iran. Some people might think Mr. Wilson wanted to get us into World War I. You may recall he had to wait for the Lusitania episode. Some people might think that Mr. Johnson wanted to send troops to Vietnam. You may recall he had to wait for the Gulf of Tonkin episode. We didn't go to war with Spain until the until the Maine exploded. And may I point out that Mr. Lincoln did not feel he could call out the Federal Army until Fort Sumter was attacked, which is why he ordered the commander at Fort Sumter to do exactly that thing which the South Carolinians had said would cause an attack. Some people might think that Mr. Roosevelt wanted to get us into World War II, as David mentioned. You may recall we had to wait for Pearl Harbor. So if, in fact, the Iranians aren't going to compromise, it would be best if somebody else started the war.
Right, so it would be best if somebody else started the war with Iran. So what he talked about was all of these entities, they attacked these entities and blamed it on another country so they can get to war with that country. That's what he was doing, right? Mr. All the crazies are out. Whistleblower gives hint to incident in nuclear power plant in China clarified. Due to a design flaw in a reactor vessel, which is France, right? Damage found to the fuel assemblies was due to abnormal vibration. So the fuel assemblies shook apart some of the fuel assemblies and they disintegrated or something. Not disintegrated, but they were released into the water and then that had to be burped out, right? Which accounted for huge numbers, but a lot of reactors will do it. There is a lot of, so you can't fix it. It's not going to go put a 9/16-inch wrench on it and fix things, right? You can't get near that. You can't even, robots can't get near it. It's lethal. So the two EPR reactors are so far the only ones in the world that are already supplying electricity, but they would have the same flaw because they're using the same fuel. Nuke, and on top of that, nuke monitorization, maybe not now nor ever. So that they were talking about, because right, they're going to have all these plutonium pits, which are the triggers for nuclear bombs. They're like 10, 20 pounds of plutonium. They're like a ball where they can have, that's the catalyst for the nuclear weapon. But the problem with that, as you've seen from Rocky Flats and Santa Susana And you see at Sellafield and La Hague where they reclaim these particles, is you release an absurd amount of radiation that covers the planet, and there's a cascade effects. So they say the United States cannot make its projected numbers of plutonium pits for nuclear weapons. Not now, not the immediate future, and maybe never. They're just saying the tech, right? Because where they're trying to do it to now, they just lost $30 billion trying to turn it into a mixed oxide fuel facility, into a MOX facility, right? And they pulled the plug on that. Now they're going to make nuclear pits there, nuclear weapons. CERN's ALICE detector takes the next step in understanding the interaction between blah, blah, blah. So this story always breaks my heart. And I cover a lot of quantum, I don't cover it, but I read and watch a lot of quantum physics and string theory and particle accelerators and everything else, just trying to understand and wrap my mind around it. And I've done it for years, and sometimes sometimes you think, when you think you know what's going on, you got to go back to the beginning and start again, because they don't even know. It's all a big friggin' guess. So they assemble all these academics and scientists, and they give them unlimited spending and money, and they give them all the prime resources on the planet, all the precious metals, all the rare elements and everything, and they get to use it for their experiments. Now, if they succeed in the experiment, it's a better theory. Here's a theory. And you need to see if this theory rings true, and it could take them, as we've seen with fusion, it's like 70 years of, we're almost there, right? Every year it's the same thing, but you got to keep the funding coming in somehow. You can't say it's hopeless. You won't get no funding if you do that. So they always fabricate, misrepresent it. So if they can figure out, now, if they can figure it out, they might be able to harness antimatter and matter, which is considered impossible, but not really, right? Because we look at the world as one thing. These people look at it totally as another, right? They're looking for what's the backbone to everything. Everything uniformly, the atoms themselves, they have much in common, right? So inside. And if they figure it out, they can crack the moon in two, for instance, or worse. So you hope they don't succeed, because it's not that they're bad people per se, it's just that industry will take over that advancement in science. And as we've seen with nuclear, which is the wrong way to produce energy, that has now got out of control to the point where they have captured the regulators, captured the universities, the nuclear industry has, and officially captured our medias, and Hollywood too, right? And certainly not just universities, but our schools. And they're firmly indoctrinating all the victims we call children that go there, and they're being infected with this propaganda and this lure of easy money, right? So they're trying to figure out what is behind the very quirks and quarks and whatever. So they can get all the way down, neutrons and protons and the quarks, and then what makes the quark tick is a string theory where everything is just vibrating all the time, and combinations, because you can tape any shape because it's a string, right? And there's so many theories. Which one? It's like pointing at the planets up there and say, let's go to that one. No, let's go to this one. nobody can, so they use absurd amount of precious resources. You got thousands and thousands of academics that could probably solve our storage problem for solar and wind, for instance, or could solve most of the problems at Fukushima. If we just took 1,000 of the 5,000 scientists that worked there and we put them to work on Fukushima, we come up with solutions, see? So we take the sharpest and the best and the brightest, we just lavish money and benefits on top of them, and all you got to do is go in and hope they glean something from this experiment. That's what they got to do. So you're wasting... there was a guy who was an insider, and he knew how evil and corrupted the culture was, military, for instance. So when he got out, he got a job. He wrote a book, and he was writing a book, and he got a job with Fox News. And he wasn't allowed to do interviews with any other media, and Fox News never used him. They just paid him a retainer. He was owned by Fox News. So he was never, ever able to tell the story until he got away from the contract. But he thought it was a genuine contract where he would be on air and could tell the horrors of what he learned in the wars. But he wasn't. They kept him at home, go surfing or go partying, do whatever you want. You got lots of money, millions of dollars every year. And when we need you, we'll call you. And he didn't. So they gave him the money to get the contract, to get exclusiveness to him. And then he couldn't publish the book, and he couldn't tell his story to independents, or he'd have to repay all the money. They do that kind of stuff all the time. Study the residual interaction between 2 quarks and 3 quark particles. And they talk about descriptions, right, of what a meson and an anti-strange quark and a proton, 2 up quarks, 1 down quarks have been observed for the first time. And if they can glean what they want, it's always about weapons, always about control. And then once they get what they finally, this is the theory anyway, to get where they finally need to get, then they can release the biological weapons, wipe out most of the planet, and they can live forever with their technology, right? It's always about, lately anyway, the last couple of decades, it's been about life extension technology. How can we transfer our brains into so-called clones, etc., etc. Connecting STEM graduates with industry. So Australia is students going to universities, want to do research projects, can get 35,000 Australian dollars. I don't look at every text message that comes in, but I have family that are really old I'm worried about, and so I check most of them. I just don't respond to everything because I get people from all over the world, and it costs me money, right? Money is in short supply this year. We had so many breakdowns. We needed so much more equipment just to meek out an existence, keep the operation moving forward, the research moving forward. I need everything new. Everything I got is just ancient now at this stage. We've been at it for so long. I need a new skidoo. We need a new motor for the boat outboard. I need pontoons on the boat for starters. We need a side-by-side and a quad, and you need a two-wheeler for going long distances, and the list just keeps going and going and going. And then how do you maintain everything? How do you keep everything operational? How do you keep... Like right now we got a lot of equipment, and it's a lot of work. It's very dangerous to do what I'm doing all the time, to research. And it's very difficult to get everything to work together. But we got an operation put together. The nuclear industry has pummeled me. and took down my site with 24,000 subscribers. It was stuck on 24,000 for the last 3 years, by the way. Never got a single extra subscriber in 3 years. Never lost one, never got another one. World Health Organization seeks a new treaty on handling future pandemics. It could be a hard sell. And so I was looking at that and I went, what the hell am I looking at? And it was a fly up there and couldn't figure out what was flying on the wall. At a special session this upcoming week, the World Health Organization hopes to start sketching out a new world order. The World Health Organization, of course, is United Nations. And that reminds me, what was it George Bush Sr. said back in the day? Come on, George, don't be shy.
We have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order, a world where the rule of law, not the law of the jungle, governs the conduct of nations. When we are successful, and we will be, we have a real chance at this new world order, an order in which a credible United Nations can use its peacekeeping role to fulfill the promise and vision of the UN's founders.
So he just called United Nations a new world order. At a special session of the New World Order, aka World Health Organization, aka United Nations, hope to start sketching out a new world order. So everybody getting new marching orders, everybody getting new memos, basically is what they're saying, yeah? That's some scary shit. Leave plant food alone. Plants use CO2 from the atmosphere, water from the ground, and energy from the sun to create sugar used for growth and fuel. Leave plant food alone. It's really eloquent, by the way. Carbon dioxide, CO2, is plant food. There's no alternative to plants. If CO2 drops to 150 parts per million, the Earth is lifeless. Here's a sobering thought. They're trying to collect all the CO2 out of the environment. They're pounding us with radioactive fallout. Net zero is internationally agreed upon goal for mitigating global warming in the second half of the century, and the IPCC, aka UN, concluded the need for net zero CO2 by 2050 to remain consistent with the 1.5. Well, the climate change is real. It's caused by 75 years of nuclear releases into the environment. Climate Change Committee, the CCC, the big 3C. Releases of the CCC spreadsheet compelled by a Freedom of Information request, because they're not going to give it out for free. The old hockey stick. And distorting UK electricity market by cancelling renewable subsidies. Maniacs, eh? Now running at $10 billion a year, and which is taxpayers want that. That's what they want the money thrown at. They don't want to waste it on nuclear. And government buying back renewable contracts in order to remove elements from the system so that the cost of operations could be reduced. And price signals to investors in reliable low-carbon energy, aka nuclear, could be restored. So what they're advocating there is to get rid of renewable, period. Buy back the renewable licenses. If you got to, stop giving them money. Just do nuclear. We're only at the beginning of the nuclear industry. Steam engines were first introduced in 1690. But we're not really good until 200 years later in 1890. My God. That's whoever wrote that is some scary, sick. I say that about every story, Dana. I know, it's the nuclear industry. What do you expect? Like, the nuclear industry doesn't have a single person, and he ain't going to be one of them. Nuclear industry doesn't have a single face for nuclear. There's not one person out there, you're like, they're a pretty cool person, you know? in the nuclear industry. You got nobody out to say, yeah, that was pretty funny, man. There's no one out in the nuclear industry going, that's as popular. The nuclear industry doesn't have it a celebrity. It's always that old patent guy, what's his name, Einstein, who worked in a patent office. And back in those days, when you died, your patent did too. And so if Einstein took your patent now and put it in his personal collection, who's to say any difference? Really? Right? So, kind of reminds you of that guy. He got shot. They said he committed suicide, but there was no weapons in the room, and he was shot with 2 different weapons in the back of the head. Neither one of the weapons were in the room. And he was a real controversial figure, and the police were like, definitely suicide. First off, to shoot yourself right in the back of the head with 2 different weapons and never left no evidence. So how did we do tonight? We got a poll. Poll's over, I guess. 37 votes. We're killing it tonight. Should nuclear scientists someday work at the ongoing Fukushima nuclear melted reactors? Not necessarily in that order. 95% said yes. An amazing 5% said no. Nuclear scientists shouldn't work at nuclear meltdowns? Why would you say that for? It must have been a mistake, eh? There can't actually be anybody that stupid on the planet, can it? Is there? Alrighty then. We made it down to 306. So I was in the woods yesterday on the quad looking for any species whatsoever. And the day before, and not Friday, because Friday was heavy rains. And it's dismal. What I do is I crawl around at 3 or 4 kilometers an hour. I'll climb up really heavily grown over trails. And when I can't go any further, I'll get off the quad and I'll hike in a little ways and I'll send a drone up ahead to see if it's safe. If it is, I'll keep going. And you can't find a sparrow. You can't find any rabbits. You can't find any birds in any trees. And I got a video there. I got to get it on my computer, hopefully for tomorrow. I found, because this is the end of November, and I found a apple tree and a dogberry tree and a red berry bushes with fruit and berries on them, and none of them decayed whatsoever. None of them fermented, right? And I was shocked, really, because we've had some major frosts. And the dogberry trees now are completely now we know berries and fruit now bioaccumulate radiation. We have a lot of studies on that. So I'm assuming they're not breaking down because there's so much radiation, which when you compare it to the research this year looking for spiders in the forest for 450 kilometers across the province here, and the research expedition this year we were targeting spiders. We were checking for everything else, right? But there should be an absurd amount of spiders, and there's none. And because spiders, you check the web for different insects, moths, butterflies, and everything else, right? And they were missing. There was no birds in any of... Well, there was 2 ponds where there was this year where there was actually a duck with little babies in 2 different ponds. We've never seen any flocks of birds whatsoever, but to find 2 ponds with ducks in it, and we covered that earlier this year. And what else? Yes, hard keeping this operation moving forward. We blew a lot of money on equipment and on the shelves too, right? And we got them installed. They make a big difference. That opened everything up, so I can start doing projects. I'm waiting for the lights to show up this week. And what else have we got coming in? We got the leg for the drone, because the drone got a broken leg. You got to catch it out of the air each time. It's got 4 props on it, right? Just worried I'm going to get chopped up by it. Oh yeah, in Japan, port catch is battering Japan's fishing industry. That's supposed to go into my wildlife folder for my next die-off video. So that don't matter, but let's call it we'll call it what it is. It was a good show. We got lots of good stories tonight, etc., etc. Dana Sana says he got blooms on his blackberry plant. Wow. It's crazy. Roots. Swear. Colette S. Hi, Colette. Kevin Blanche. Hi, Kevin. Good night, everybody. Don't forget to give us a thumbs up. Not that it matters, I suppose. And Jeff. Hello, everyone. Hope everybody's having a great night. Great day tomorrow. Blue Jay. Outpost. Hey, Robert. Why does Trudeau's brother live in Iran? That's a good question. Just going to say a little shout out for everybody. Mike Mansfield. Wow. So, that was a good night. Paul Tippy. The only problem is we got Angelica. We got so many stories behind. It's nasty. And so many more coming at you every day. There's a big push now for nuclear, for sure. Katja. Shayla White. Hi, Shayla. Katja. Chad. Kroll. Everybody's doing good. Almost through the names here. Come back down to the most recent. Andrew B. James Lucid. Yeah. Price Anderson gives the industry immunity. Good one. Darlene. Lots of stuff to read after for me. Transuranic waste stem cells. Oh my God. That's scary. Provoke. So I'm gonna have to start doing 10-hour shows to catch up to all the nuclear before the end of the year, because December starts this week. Vitra. Hi, everybody. Yeah. I only serve one king. Lori. Ella. Yeah, we got quite the crew here tonight. Wow. Yeah, no worries. Amy Howard. Hugs for everybody. Port Angeles. Port Angeles. Yeah, good night, everybody. Tree Fruit. Just try to get in a few more names before we call it night. Hugs for everybody after watching this. In the background, everybody. watching tonight or tomorrow or next day. Google is going to butcher my numbers and my thumbs up and everything. And I don't care about that. I'm not here for... I'm here to tell the story, whether anybody comes or not. I'm here to tell that story. I'm here to go to war every day. I'm at war every day. I can only do so much, right, with so little. I was thinking today how weird it is, because I go to war on such a tiny budget. I've been doing it for so long. I'm very focused on equipment. What, you know, it could take me forever, and it does many times. It could take me a year to build a certain facet of operation that I need. It's a very humbling thing we do here, but a very necessary thing. God bless. Good night, everybody. We'll see everybody. Kevin been saying he's been tide jumping the whole week. He's naked. It's terrifying. God bless everybody. Hugs for everybody. Have a great night. Great day tomorrow. We'll see everybody tomorrow night. Don't forget to give us a thumbs up. There's links in the description if somebody wants to donate. We're definitely hurting. Have a great night. I'll see everybody soon. Take care, folks.